Good morning, everybody. My name is Chris Gorgeous, and I'm from ASL Basics, and today we're going to be doing a live class. This is definitely outside of my comfort zone, but today we're going to be going over the 3 fundamental keys of learning any language. And so this is going to be focused primarily on sign language, but this is actually going to be applicable to learning any language. So if you're interested in learning the language more quickly, to forget less, and also to communicate more, then this class is going to have a lot of value for you. Before we get started, just go ahead and let me know what languages are you currently learning, and what kind of struggles are you trying to overcome, or what kind of roadblocks are you facing with learning a new language. And so with all of that said, we're going to go ahead and jump right into it, and we're going to go into the very first key to learning a new language, and that key is input. And so this has a more technical term. It's called comprehensible input in academia, but in a nutshell, it basically just means that you're trying to increase your exposure. So really quickly, we're going to go over why that's important and also how we can do it. And so why is it important? I'm going to just really briefly talk about this study that was really interesting, and it was called the Hart-Risley study. It was done back in 1999. And basically what they did is they would study early childhood language acquisition and why some children had a larger vocabulary than others, and the role of exposure into that. And so this study was conducted over a decade, and 6 of those years were just spent typing and coding and analyzing 30,000 pages of transcripts. But basically what they did is they sat in about an hour every day with families, and they recorded how many words the children were exposed to. And the really interesting part about that is the correlation between the number of words that were in the child's vocabulary compared to how many words those kids were exposed to. So I'm going to show you a quick graph right here. And so what this graph represents is the vocabularies of 3-year-olds. And so you'll notice that there's a pretty big jump in vocabularies. So on the low end, you'll see 525 words, middle end 749, and then 1,116. And the big difference between those vocabulary sizes was the number of words that they were exposed to. And this is really interesting because this is as early as 3 years old. And you can see the differences in the sizes of their vocabulary. And this was all because of the amount of words that they were exposed to. And that gap can be huge. And so on the lower end, children were exposed to like maybe 15 million words versus 45 million words. So the study was actually coined like the 30 million word gap. And basically, in a nutshell, what it shows is that there's a direct correlation to how many words that we're exposed to and how many words that we're able to produce, and how quickly we're able to acquire that language. So how do we increase that exposure for ourselves? So YouTube is actually a really powerful platform. I was reading this book last year called The Innovator's Mindset, and he was talking about these middle schoolers that were able to learn how to build a hovercraft just from YouTube. And so it's really turned into this learning platform. And if you're learning sign language, on my website, I've listed some YouTube channels that are sign language focused. Bill Vickers, ASL That, deaf professors that teach the language directly and have classes that are kind of surrounded with language learning. And also, like, vlogging is very popular. So if that's something that you're into, Sign Duo, Signed with Heart, these channels have a lot of great content for you to go ahead and dive into and increase your exposure to the language. Because what's important about comprehensible input is that it's more than just words. It's more than just vocabulary. It needs to be conversations. It needs to be the language with how it's actually used. And there's no better way to do that than to expose yourself to actual conversations and just real live world input. So those resources are great if you're wanting to learn sign language. And if you're learning another language besides ASL, then there are also YouTube channels that are in other languages. Whatever target language that you are learning, then you need to be exposing yourself to that language as much as possible. And so that's going to, and actually there's more resources too. So movies, if you want to expose yourself to more of the language, to more of the culture. Again, these are more sign language focused. Your Name is Jonah, Sound and Fury, Wonderstruck, A Quiet Place. These are all have deaf actors, actresses. They incorporate sign language and touch on deaf culture a little bit. TV show, Switched at Birth. This is a great TV series. It came out about 10 years, I think it was. But this also includes deaf actors and actresses, and they use sign language throughout every episode. And they really dive deep into the culture. And so if that is a TV series that you haven't watched yet and you're learning sign language, that's a great one to get started with. And I also listed like Signing Time, Baby Signing Time. These are more directed for children. So if you're trying to teach your children, they're great, but they're also great if you're adults. They teach real common words, everyday language. And documentaries, See What I'm Saying Through Deaf Eyes. These are great documentaries to really learn more about the culture, and you're going to be able to just learn and expose yourself to more of the language. So with that, again, these resources are all available on the website. If you go to the homepage of aslbasics.com, you'll see Let's Get Started, free resources. You just click that button and you'll have links to all of those different resources that I've mentioned, including also to some ASL dictionaries. And I see more people are learning. Let's see if I can highlight some of these comments here. We got somebody learning Polish. We have somebody learning ASL, and we also have Leah G learning ASL. So I want to thank everybody that is here live with me right now. George, Cindy, Larry, Amira, George, thank you all for coming this morning, and hopefully that you're finding value in this video so far. And so the first key is exposure. The second key to learning a new language is, if I can get this going, is output. So the first key is input, right? We want to expose ourselves to the language as much as possible, and preferably in ways that we actually enjoy, right? If we don't enjoy the process, we're probably going to just give up on it. But basically, output is going to be the other side of that equation. That's going to be using what we know. And this is where we can take a really valuable lesson from children and how they learn languages and how they use languages. And so you take a 1-year-old and they're not able to formulate sentences. They only have a very small number of words that they know. Maybe it's mom, maybe it's hungry, maybe it's tired. And, just with those one-word sentences, they're able to convey what they want. And when we're just beginning to learn a language, our vocabulary is going to be that of a toddler, and then as a 2-year-old, and then as a 3-year-old, and it kind of progresses like that as well. And the secret to that is that we need to use what little we know, especially in the beginning. Because if we're not using what we know and we're not using it, then we're not going to be able to produce the language. And that is such an important key to learning it. And one big tip is to try to get over the fear of being wrong and really kind of relish in those mistakes. And we see this in children all the time. They are not afraid of making mistakes. They're not subconscious of looking silly or being judged. But we as an adults, that's a really big roadblock. Subconsciously, we don't want to look stupid. We don't want to say the wrong thing. We don't want to appear like we can't communicate what we want to. And so if we can overcome that fear and kind of build up that confidence and just realize that, yeah, we may have the language and the vocabulary of a toddler, but that's okay. If we're going to get to the next step, we're going to go ahead and have to use what we know. And so like one great way of doing that is to join like practice sessions. Every Wednesday, I've been hosting ASL group practice sessions and connecting students with each other. So they're able to get together and use what they know with one another. And so if that's something that you're interested in, just please feel free to let me know, and I can give you a link to that. And also, just as a note, all the references and resources and everything I'll have in the description area below on YouTube, and there will be links to all of that. The third key is going to be actually a two-parter. It's going to be review and feedback, and we'll be talking a little bit about what a language parent is and why that's so important. Let's not get too far ahead of myself here. Okay, so the first part of that is going to be review and understand that a language is a skill. And with any skill, it's going to take that you actually use what it is that you're trying to learn. And many cases, you may have heard of the 10,000 hour rule. Like if you want to become proficient at it, if you want to become skilled at something, it's going to just take 10,000 hours of just like raw practice and doing it. But we have to also understand that repetition is so important. Oh boy, my voice is starting to crack. And it's only been a few minutes. That's not a good sign. But anyways, like many times we just want to go ahead and learn a sign or learn a word and it's one and done. But really, that's not how the brain works. The brain works through repetition. And there's a saying called the neurons that fire together wire together. And the reason for that is the more that we repeat something over and over and over again, whether it's a sport or whether it's a language or whether it's a skill, if we don't do that repetition, we're not going to become skilled at it. And languages are no different. So repetition is really, really important. And speaking of repetition, there's this really great book that is all about how you can increase your memory. And this is written by, let's see if I can get it up on the screen here. Unlimited Memory. So this is by Grandmaster Kevin Horsley. He's a master chess player. And he has the world record for memorizing the most digits of pi. 3.14259. And it just goes on and on. But he memorized 10,000 places of that number, and he has a world record in it. And so he wrote this book that's all about how you can increase your memory and forget less. And that is one of the biggest challenges to learning the language is learning a word or learning a sign, and a week later it's gone. And so what he teaches is there's lots of different methods that he uses, but one of them is called spaced repetition. And basically you can boil it down to like a 3x3 method of, if you learn something new before the day is over, try to review it 3 times. And then in the first week, try to review it 3 times again. And in the first month, review it 3 times again. And this is a really, really powerful way to stop forgetting things. And that review is so important. So if you review it a lot when you first learn it, and then you review it less frequently with times more spaced apart, then you're going to be able to retain that information. And think about like a phone number that you learned from 10, 15 years ago. And for many of us, that number is still in our in our memories, or addresses, or just think of different little things like that that are just rooted in our long-term memory. And that spaced repetition is a great way to transfer that new information from our short-term memory to our midterm memory to our long-term memory. So review is definitely really important. And I really love this quote from the book too. It says, you can remember mountains of information when you are interested in the subject. It almost feels automatic, and your concentration is at a peak. Your deficits of attention are mostly interest deficits. So this is another aspect of language learning that many of us maybe take the wrong approach. We may want to focus on vocabulary, and we're focusing on books and things like that, and approaching languages as an academic exercise. But if we don't find that exercise or that method very appealing or interesting, then we're not going to remember what we learn, and we're probably going to give up rather quickly. And I think it's between like 90 to 95% of people that attempt to learn a new language aren't successful, and they give up. And I think most of that is attributed to not enjoying the process. And so much of learning a language is finding ways to make the process enjoyable. And another quick book that is really, really great for just learning anything really is Understanding How the Brain Works. So this is a book called The Motivated Brain. It's by Gail Gregory. And one of the quotes that she had is, if learning is interesting, challenging, and meaningful, doing the work is its own reward. And so, again, it kind of comes back to making the process fun. And if you ever do research into polyglots, people that learn lots of languages, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 languages, one thing that they all have in common is they make the language learning process enjoyable. And that's different for everybody. So one of the things that I encourage all of you that are trying to learn a new language is to try to find a way to make the language learning process enjoyable. Let's see here. Okay, so this is going to go back. So we've gone over the review part of it. So we want to make sure that we review what we are learning on a consistent basis. And we can use that spaced repetition to help us not forget the things that we're learning. And the second part of that is feedback. And this is what a good language parent is actually taken from a TED Talk by Chris Lonsdale. He's a linguist from New Zealand. And his TED Talk is about how you can learn any language in 6 months. And one of those factors is having a good language parent. And he goes over 4 aspects of what a good language parent is and what they do. And so the first thing is that good language parent is going to work to understand what you are saying. And again, think back to when you're a child, or maybe you're a parent and you have a small one at home. Think of how you interact with them, and you really want to try to understand what they're saying. You know, if they say hungry, you're going to want to know what they're hungry for. If they're tired, you're going to want to put them down for a nap. And, you know, it's trying to figure out what it is that they're saying. And when you're learning a new language, having a good language parent, somebody that is going to really put in the effort to try to understand what you're saying, can go a long ways. The second part of that is they're not going to correct every single mistake. And this can be really difficult when somebody is fluent and then somebody is learning. And if you are being corrected, now don't get me wrong, like feedback and positive criticism is really important to that entire process. But if somebody's being corrected on every single mistake, on every single sentence that's coming out of their mouth or out of their hands, then that person is going to get really discouraged really quickly. So if you're going to be a good language parent, or if you want to seek a good language parent, finding somebody that won't, criticize every mistake that you do is going to be really important. The third one is they confirm understanding by using correct language. So we do this with kids all the time. And maybe they're saying, I want to brush my teeth. And you say, oh, you want to brush your teeth. And you model what the language is actually supposed to be like. So you want to make sure that you can find somebody that will give you that positive feedback and kind of give you those corrections along the way. And then the fourth one is using words that the learner knows. And so if you're talking to a child, you're not going to be using words like, hey, you need to increase your comprehensible input. That's just going to go right over the kid's head. And we as language learners, we have a very limited vocabulary. So it's really important that we try to use the words that we're familiar with. And that is true on both sides of the equation. If you're looking for a good language parent, make sure that you can find somebody that is going to use words and signs that are maybe you're not familiar with yet, but is willing to kind of put in the work and effort to help you build up your vocabulary and really reinforce the language that you already know, which kind of goes back to that output, using what you know. And again, like the TED Talk that this is from, I'll have a link to that TED Talk in the description area down below if you're watching this on YouTube. And let me know if you're live here today. Let me know if this is providing value. Are you finding this interesting, the 3 keys to learning a new language? And basically, we're just going to go ahead and bring it all back home again and go over the 3 keys, or the 3 fundamental keys to learning a new language. And remember, the first one is going to be input. So that's going to be exposing yourself to the language as much as possible. The second one is output, trying to use the language as much as you can, no matter the size of your vocabulary, whether you've been learning for a week or whether you've been learning for 10 years, just constantly using the language that you are wanting to be fluent in. And then the last one is going to be the review and feedback. Make sure that you're reviewing what you learn on a consistent basis and getting feedback from somebody that can be a good language parent for you. So go ahead and stick around for a little while. Myself and my wife will join in for a live Q&A, and let me know if you have any questions about what we covered today. Let me know if you have any questions with anything that we covered today. What languages you're learning, what pain points you're experiencing. Like, what are some of the biggest challenges that you've been having with learning a new language, whether it's Polish or ASL or anything else? I see, Catherine, thank you. These tips are so helpful. Thank you very much. And that's really what I want to provide. I want to provide a lot of tips and advice to really make the language learning process more bearable and more successful. Because I know so many of us want to learn a new language for really noble causes. Many of us want to make a connection. Maybe it's with our children, maybe it's with others within the community, maybe it's with clients. But really, the learning a new language can be such a positive thing, and can create that connection. And before you take off, be sure, if you found this class valuable, be sure to go ahead and click the like button on YouTube. And if you want more classes like this, you can subscribe. And if you click that bell notification down there, it'll send you a notification before any of these events go live again. So that way you can jump in and be part of the class. So I'll go ahead and open it up to a quick Q&A, AMA style, if you want to ask me anything. And I'll hang on for just a few minutes, and I can answer any questions you might have. Jolie mentions, I tuned in late. I'm not sure if it was covered, but do you recommend any specific resources for language learning? Yeah, so that was actually covered in the first key, where I was talking about comprehensible input, basically exposing yourself to the language as much as possible. And let me see if I can go ahead and back up to that slide. And so if you go to my website, if you're learning sign language, I have a lot of resources listed on aslbasics.com. Online ASL dictionaries, movies, TV shows, documentaries, resources for kids, books, both about learning sign language and also about learning languages in general. And so we talked a little bit about movies and TV shows and documentaries, and also YouTube channels. And one of the ways that many people enjoy learning things, and like YouTube is like the second largest search engine on the planet aside from Google itself. And so YouTube ends up being this learning platform. And if you're learning sign language, I have a lot of these resources on the website, like Bill Vickers, ASL That, deaf instructors that teach ASL, and vloggers like Sign Duo, Signed with Heart. And also I have a lot of lessons if you're wanting to learn sign language. So all that stuff is on the website at aslbasics.com. And I'll also have links to all these resources in the description area down below. Thank you for the question, Jolie. And we have Larry, finding someone to practice with is challenging. Absolutely. And this is a particular challenge too these days. We've been in quarantines for almost 2 months now. And finding other people to associate with, let alone practice with, can be a real challenge. And if you're learning sign language, if you'd like, I've been hosting these free ASL group practice sessions every Wednesday at 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern time. And basically what we'll do is we'll network students that are learning at different stages, beginners and intermediates and advanced. And we'll pair them up, and they'll have 20 minutes or so to just practice with each other. And at the end of that, we'll kind of go over tips like this, language learning tips, and how to overcome certain challenges and things like that. But yeah, finding others to practice with. If you can convince friends or family to learn whatever language that you're wanting to learn with you, that can be huge. If not, then finding people online that will use the language with you. Try to connect with people through social media, Instagram, Facebook, or YouTubers, and just being able to find others that are learning the language or are fluent in the language, that are willing to be a good language parent for you, though that can really help things out. So thank you for your question, Larry. Are there conversational videos on YouTube? Yes. So again, YouTube is a great search engine. So what you can do is, if you're learning sign language, you can type in sign language conversations, or interpreted videos are actually great too. What you can do is watch the video without sound first and really expose yourself to the language, and then turn the audio back on so you can be familiar with the content, what was being signed, and then go back a third time and with the audio off, and try to pick up as much as possible. And Steve Kaufman recently did this interview, and he's a linguist that knows like 20 languages. Amazing guy. And he actually owns, or he's the co-founder of LingQ website, where they teach languages. But anyways, one of the things that he talked about was, oh man, I just completely lost my thought. Patterns. So like if you're watching something, to be sure to look out for patterns. And the brain is really wired for this. We're really built to kind of take notice and notice patterns. And we can do this in everyday life and also with languages. So for instance, if you're watching a video that is in sign language, or even if you're listening to like a verbal language, if you start noticing words pop up and phrases pop up over and over and over again, take note of that. And if you have a notebook, even write that down. And once you learn what that content was, that's going to really expedite the entire language learning process. Jasmine, I see that you're learning Korean. That is awesome. Noah Rodriguez. Hello, Chris. Hello, Noah. Really appreciate the videos. Lisa Gamble, thank you very much. And I do have some other classes planned in the future, and you can let me know which ones are more excited, or which ones may better suit you. So I have one class that I wanted to talk about the power of mindset. And so many of us, when we go to approach to learn a new language, we shoot ourselves in the foot by saying that I'm not a language person. And having the appropriate mindset can make all the difference in the world, whether you're learning a new language or whether you're learning anything. And the difference between a fixed mindset and a growth mindset. And if that's something that you might be interested in learning more about, you can just let me know in the comments. Also, finding ways to become motivated, ways to different methods, and as far as learning the language, just let me know. You can let me know in the comments right now, or you can also get in touch with me on social media. I can be found on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter and TikTok, YouTube, and they're all under ASL Basics. And you can also contact me through the website, aslbasics.com, or you can shoot me an email at chris@aslbasics.com. Okay, and if we have no one else commenting, I will go ahead and end this class. And thank you so much for everybody coming up. And remember, input, output, and feedback. If you can get those 3 fundamental keys, you're going to make your life a lot easier with learning the language. If you want to learn more sign language, you can actually, both my wife and I tutor on one-on-one. So you can check out that website, or you can check out patreon.com/ASL Basics. And we have various one-on-one tutoring programs available there. And if you have been, thank you for watching. And until next time, I'll see you later. Bye.